are listening to the Metal Command Podcast.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you, and today I am here to talk about something that has become pretty controversial with a lot of Iron Maiden fans here in the metal scene, and that's this. The studio albums that they have put out since Bruce Dickinson rejoined the band in 1999. So everything from Brave New World all the way to the album Senjutsu. And I bring this up because this is a topic that has been talked about not only on my radio show for the last 20 plus years, but it is also something that always comes up when they put out a new album. And that is how good, and I'm going to ask you guys this, what do you guys think? Where would you rate and rank a lot of the albums they have put out since Bruce rejoined? In all seriousness, I really want some feedback. I'm curious in the comments what all of you think about this, because I have my opinion. My opinion is, actually, I get flack from both sides when I say this, but I really don't care. It's what I think, and that opinion, unfortunately, has not changed since Brave New World had come out back. I believe it was like 2000 when it came out. So, but I've had this opinion of Iron Maiden. First of all, let's get this out of the way. They are one of my top 5 favorite bands of all time. I wouldn't even be doing this show if Iron Maiden didn't exist. I still remember going and buying a copy of Power Slave, and for the first time listening to the song Aces High, and I loved the song so much I actually kept repeating it over and over again before I listened to the rest of the album. But the new material they've put out, Bruce obviously was out of the band for a while, and they had 2 albums with Blaze Bayley, which really weren't that great. And then Bruce rejoins, and rightfully so. He belongs there. And the new albums they have put out have been a topic of conflict between a lot of Iron Maiden fans out there. So I'm curious what all of you think about this. Now, for me, Iron Maiden is like probably the most iconic metal band in my opinion. They are one of the forefathers. Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Black Sabbath. These are bands that really were very, very important to the metal scene, more so than most people realize. And I still think to this day, these guys to this day, being in their 60s and 70s, are still putting on probably, in my opinion, the best live show out there. I don't care what band you're in. I don't care who you are. Iron Maiden's live show, even to this day, is top notch, and nobody does it better live than Iron Maiden. They are probably one of the greatest live bands I have ever heard and I have ever seen. Just top notch. Everything about their live show is top notch. They cut no corners. Guys, at one point, Bruce Dickinson was flying the band in a custom 747 cargo / transport plane, and they were flying to their shows. Now, he's not doing that anymore, but they were doing that. That is how badass this band is. However, there is only one aspect of this band that, to me as a fan, is slightly disappointing. And when I say slightly, I'm talking about the new material they have put out. Now, obviously, they've had a new album out for a while, Senjutsu. Really cool artwork, by the way. But the thing is this, to me, and I'll give you my opinion now. I'm curious as to what all of you think. In my opinion, Iron Maiden has been dwelling, when it comes to their studio albums only, I'm not talking about the live show. I'm definitely not talking about the artwork on the albums, or the live albums for that matter. I am talking about their studio material. The albums of new music that they have been putting out. To me, Iron Maiden has been dwelling in a pool of mediocrity when it comes to their new studio albums since Bruce rejoined the band. Now, let me repeat that. I'm not saying the albums are terrible. I'm definitely not saying that the albums are 8, 9, 10 out of 10. But they have been dwelling in a pool of mediocrity when it comes to new music since Bruce rejoined the band. Now, for most Iron Maiden fans, most people that I know, most people think the peak of the band was Number of the Beast through Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. Now, I would probably disagree with that. I would say the first two albums with Paul Di'Anno are fantastic. I would say probably the peak of the band was the first album through Seventh Son. However, I actually did like Fear of the Dark quite a bit. No Prayer for the Dying, not so much. It was okay. Probably like a 6 out of 10 if I had to give it a rating. But Iron Maiden, since Bruce had rejoined the band, to me, with their new music and their studio albums, they've been dwelling in a pool of mediocrity. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me clarify what I am saying. All of these records, I went back and looked. First of all, this is what I did. I actually went back and listened to the entire Iron Maiden discography over the last 2 months. It took me 2 months to get through it. Not only did I listen to all of the studio albums, but I listened to all of the singles. I listened to all of the live albums because I wanted the new perspective on this, because many of these newer studio albums they have put out, I haven't heard in a very, very long time. So I wanted to make sure that I still thought that these albums were mediocre, because sometimes, you go and listen to an album again that you haven't heard in a long time. Suddenly you like it a lot better. And these Iron Maiden albums in the 2000s up until now, they're okay. They're not terrible. But most of them would get a 6 out of 10, maybe a 7 out of 10, depending on which album it is. Like, I like Dance of Death. I thought that album was actually pretty solid. I think I gave it a 7 out of 10 at the time. I'd still pretty much agree with that. And Senjutsu actually had some cool songs on it. Here's the biggest problem that most fans have, though. Actually, most fans have three major problems. And this is what a lot of the newer people have told me. There are some people that worship everything they do and think it's the greatest thing. It's not the artwork on the albums. The artwork has been great. Dance of Death had kind of a weird cover, but the artwork on the singles and the albums, it's definitely always been top notch. But three things fans that I've spoken to, many of which, most of this I agree with, these are the things that fans have a problem with. Number one, let's talk about the production of the albums and how bad they sound. They don't really sound great. When you compare Iron Maiden to other heavy metal bands, the production quality of the album, the sound quality of the album is, to be honest with you, is mediocre to terrible, depending on which record it is. I don't think they sound great, first of all. Second of all, a lot of fans have this problem with some of these songs repeating the choruses over and over and over again. Okay? And then the third thing is, many people feel that they have these songs that are too long and drawn out and have these long interludes, and they could shorten these 12-minute songs to like 6-7 minutes. And those are the major things that people have an issue with. The other thing is, I am going to compliment them on something after this, because I think that it's going to go into my main point when I talk about them dwelling in a pool of mediocrity. So let's talk about the first thing, the production. The production, I'll be honest with you, by today's standards is absolutely terrible. These albums don't sound great. And the thing is, Iron Maiden has not really put out an album that has had a top-notch sounding production in over 30 years. The two albums Blaze sang on didn't sound great. And obviously Kevin Shirley, being the guy that is, producing and mixing and doing whatever he's doing with these new Iron Maiden albums, it's been bad. It really hasn't been great. I'm not talking about songwriting. I'm talking about the production quality of the album. Let's make a comparison. Judas Priest had some pretty bad sounding albums. Nostradamus sounded horrible. And I think it was Redeemer of Souls. That album had a terrible production. They decided, you know what? the fans are sick of this. Let's go get an established guy to make this band sound great on record, sound the best that we can. And they ended up going and getting Andy Sneap, and Firepower is probably one of, if not the best sounding Judas Priest album ever. I mean, they put that album out and it blew people's doors off. Now, the interesting thing about Iron Maiden when it comes to production of their albums, I mean, think about this. What if Iron Maiden went out and got an Andy Sneap or a Jacob Hansen or somebody and put out, not only would they put an album out that sounds great, but they went out and put out a top-notch production like Judas Priest did. I can guarantee you, I mean, there are people that go crazy for these new albums, right? For the new Maiden album. They'll go out and buy it. Everybody gets excited. But imagine how much more that excitement would be if they were to put out an amazing sounding record. Not just an album where, you know, I'll be honest with you, there are bands that send me demos that sound a little bit better than a lot of these Maiden albums, okay? But just a sonically perfect sounding album. Just like Firepower, I don't think it had the best songs Judas Priest ever wrote, but man, the sound of that album blew me out of the water. Now, me personally, when Iron Maiden comes out with a new album, I do go out and I always buy a copy on vinyl, and I always buy a CD copy of the album. But I'll tell you what, if they came out with an album that just sounded so good that, like say Firepower did by Priest, I would probably be going out and buying t-shirts. I would probably spend double the amount of money, if not more, on that record, because I would be that fired up and excited as a fan. And I know I'm not the only person out there that thinks this way. But the production has really, really hurt these guys. It really, really has. And that is probably one of the biggest complaints. A lot of people don't like saying that. To me, I'm going to say it because it is what it is. These albums don't sound great. Now, as far as the songwriting goes, I mean, that's more of a subjective thing. For me, I would probably rate the songwriting decent. And I'm going to talk about the songwriting and, of course, the long interludes and, you know, the choruses that repeat each other over and over again. Let me talk about the first thing. The long, drawn-out interludes and epics and stuff like that. I think that gets a little overblown on a lot of the records. I think that they could easily cut some of these songs down to make them. I think there were some people on YouTube that like made edits of them, and the songs flowed and sounded a lot better than these long, you know, like a minute and a half intros or interludes or whatever they put on a lot of these albums. Like in Senjutsu, they got 3 of them. They got 3 songs, super long, crazy songs. Now, I'm okay with long songs, but let's be honest. These songs are definitely not Alexander the Great or Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Okay. But I think a lot of that, to me, that is probably my biggest complaint on the songwriting. The second thing that people complain about are the repetitive choruses. And that really doesn't bother me as much as a fan. And I sort of get why they probably do this. Now, I don't know why specifically, but I'm going to guess as to why they are doing this. The biggest compliment, here's what's funny. These studio albums, when I listen to them, I'm not thoroughly impressed with how they sound. But when and I think with every album they have put out, Matter of Life and Death, I think, is the exception to this. And Senjutsu, obviously, they haven't put out a live album yet, but most likely they will. But after all of these studio albums, they always put out a subsequent live album. Brave New World had a live album come out. I think it was Rock in Rio. Dance of Death, of course, there was a live album that came out after that. Final Frontier, when that came out, there was a live album after that. There was a live album after Book of Souls, etc., etc. What's crazy is the songs come alive. I mean, they sound so much better on the live records than they do in the studio albums. They really, really do. And Iron Maiden has always been good at that, right? I mean, like Live After Death to me is probably the greatest live album ever. Or one of them. Beast Over Hammersmith I'd probably put right up there. But man, folks, the songs sound great live. but in the studio, there's a lot to be desired as far as how they sound. But let me go back to the repetitive choruses. If you listen to the live albums or you go to the shows, okay, you'll notice something. Those repeating choruses, they may not sound great on the record, as far as the songwriting goes, but when they go and play live, because people have had that chorus hammered into their brains by listening to these, the new album, it gets the crowd interacting. Because what Bruce will do, let's say the song Brave New World. He repeats that line over and over again, but when he does that, the crowd interacts and they start doing it, and it gets them into the show. Now, there are bands that do this on purpose because they care more about how the live shows are going to go down and the fan interaction than probably, whether changing the lyrics up. So I really don't have a problem with the repetitive choruses. That really doesn't bother me, because I get why they would probably do that. Now, I don't know if that's the reason, but regardless of whether they do it intentionally or unintentionally, it translates well to the live shows. And if you want further proof of that, just take some of the stuff off, the X Factor or Virtual 11. A good example would be the song The Klansman. The Klansman sounds amazing live, but it definitely does not sound good on the album. Now, part of that is Blaze Bayley singing on it, and he was definitely not the right singer for that band. Blaze's solo career, of course, a different story. His solo career stuff and the stuff he did in Wolfsbane, I think, is great. But Iron Maiden, he was not a good singer for Iron Maiden at all. I don't think anybody would disagree with me on that. But the Klansmen, when they play it live and Bruce is singing it, and they yell the word freedom a few times, the crowd gets into that. So I get the repetitive choruses. But to me, the new material, and many of you out there, I don't know if you all disagree with me or not, I think they dwell in a pool of mediocrity. Now, you're going to get that share of fans who really are going to bash the new stuff and think it all sucks. You're going to get people that worship Maiden and think it's the greatest stuff ever. For me, they ride in that like 6 out of 10 range on some of these albums. I think the highest rating I gave an album by Iron Maiden since they came back with Bruce was Dance of Death. I think I gave it a 7 out of 10. The rest of them are about a 6. They really are. And Senjutsu was kind of borderline 6 or 7 for me. There was some cool stuff on there that they really have never done. But Senjutsu, man. But the one thing that they've always excelled at is the artwork. The artwork on the albums. This Samurai Eddie is phenomenal. And Iron Maiden alone for the artwork, I think, is fantastic. But I have to tell you that the new stuff, it's not my go-to thing. Okay? It really isn't. Most fans will tell you that their best material was the stuff they did in the 80s. Number of the Beast through Seventh Son. I get it. I'm not somebody that likes to get stuck on albums. There are plenty of metal bands out there that, in my opinion, are putting out better music than they did in the 80s. I'm talking about bands that have been around 30, 40 years. The production is better. The songwriting is definitely better. But a legacy band like Iron Maiden, it just blows my mind that they would not, and I'm sure they never will, but it blows my mind that they have not gone out and had a top-notch producer make a top-notch sounding album. Because here's the thing, folks, I guarantee you Iron Maiden would, that album, if they were to go out and do that, get an Andy Sneap to produce it, or somebody of his caliber. It doesn't have to be him, but he's from England. No, he's in the UK. I guarantee you the fan response would be fantastic to this. I'm listening to Senjutsu, and, I love the album. I think it's great. As far as the songs go, this is actually one of the better ones, in my opinion. But man, the production really hurts it. It really hurts this record. And not only that, but they have these 3 long songs on there that could be shortened quite a bit. But I'm looking at, look at this artwork, man. Look at the artwork on this thing. I mean, that is phenomenal. But The Time Machine is probably one of my favorite Maiden songs, easily. Writing on the Wall is a pretty interesting one. And these are really, really cool songs. But how much better would this album be if it sounded amazing? If it had the same sound quality that Judas Priest does with Firepower. I don't like to compare them to Priest, but I'm just using that as a reference of a legacy band that actually went out, who was producing their own stuff, that actually went out and hired somebody very good to produce a record for them and to record it and mix it. It's not like Iron Maiden can't afford to pay him to do it. There's plenty of people out there that could easily make Iron Maiden sound absolutely phenomenal. And I'm talking about it on the record. Everything else about the band I have no problem with, right? I love the live show. I love the live albums. The fan club is a really cool fan club to be a part of. The artwork never fails pretty much. The artwork is always amazing. And, it just blows my mind that they would just allow themselves to kind of remain in this kind of mediocre state. That's really where it is. That's really where I see their new music. I don't think it's bad. I mean, it's not terrible, but ask yourself this question. I'm going to leave you all with this. If another band not named Iron Maiden put this music out with the same production, how many of you would really pay attention to it? Like, how many of you would go out and buy the album by this unknown band? Let's say if you took these songs and the performances of these songs and the production of these songs and just slapped a different name on it, how many of you out there would actually go out and buy these records or think they are great? Especially for the people that like them. I could pretty much tell you that a lot of people would probably ignore a band like this. But you slap an Iron Maiden logo on it, they're going to go out and buy it. They are going to think it's great. But if another band put this music out that wasn't Iron Maiden, how far would they go? I'm going to leave it as an open-ended question. I'm not going to answer it, but I'm just throwing it out there for some perspective for you folks. I'm just throwing it out there for you because the reality is, and I hear stuff, and here's the thing. When I talk about the band's bad production, I get about 100 albums sent to me a month. That's what it feels like. Maybe not that many, but pretty close. And when I hear bands that produce, even if I don't like the music, that have a better sounding album than a band like Iron Maiden, it disappoints me a little bit. It really does. Now, the live albums, that tells a different story. The live albums are a lot better. These songs, like the Book of Souls, I didn't think had a great production on it, and it was a decent album. But man, when they played those songs live, when I saw them play those songs live, and I got the live album afterwards, it was a much different feel. The songs sort of, I don't know, the songs just took on a whole different vibe. And I think if they recorded an album where it sounded amazing, where they had a top-notch production, because the last real top-notch producer they had was Martin Perch. Well, I mean, he's been retired now for like 30 years. But anyhow, this is where I'm at. So I'm curious as to what all of you think. I want to know, folks, where do you rank their albums, the new stuff? I'm not talking about anything else, but the stuff since Bruce rejoined, from Brave New World all the way to the present day. Where do you rank these Iron Maiden albums? What do you think of them? Do you think they're great? Do you think they're average? Do you think they're mediocre? Do you think they suck? I'm curious in the comments what all of you think. And of course, if you like the video, like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video. But I'm curious. I want to know what you think. Now, where would I rank them? Like which ones, like I'm talking 2000 and on, which Iron Maiden albums do I think, which of these albums do I like the most? I'll give you like my top 3. I don't have any order. Dance of Death, I liked. The Final Frontier, believe it or not, I actually did like that record quite a bit. I know that's a weird one, but a lot of people disagree with me on that. And Brave New World. Brave New World has some cool songs. Out of the Silent Planet, the title track, The Wicker Man, Blood Brothers, a lot of really cool stuff. Senjutsu has its moments. It has some really cool songs on it. And I love, what I love about the album, I love the artwork. I mean, obviously. But again, how much better would this album have come across if it sounded really, really good? Like it had a top-notch production. And that's the reality of the situation. That's what a lot of people think. That's what I think. Now, Iron Maiden has taken no shortcuts on their live show. These live albums sound amazing. I mean, there really isn't, like if you go and look at what the band is doing, there really isn't much to hate. And I don't really want to hate on them and their new music because I do like quite a bit of it. But man, it's like, they can do so much better if they really wanted to. That they could make better sounding records if they really wanted to, but they don't. But I'll still go to the shows. I'll still buy my vinyl copy of the album when they come out with a subsequent live album. And I hope to God they put a live album out with them playing Alexander the Great live. Because that's the one cool thing. That's what I'm really excited about. Alexander the Great being played live. I can't wait to see that. To see that in person or to hear it on a live record. But I definitely think they need to do they need to do better musically on their regular studio albums, especially with the album's production. So with that said, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Let me know what you think in the comments.